Good morning. As president and representative of the Georgetown Cultural Citizen Memorial Association, I welcome all to our second 2022 Black History Month event. The first, and it was a true success, the art and the artist panel discussions was great. On last Sunday, we celebrated that event. GCCMA, as we are known, is proud to honor and acknowledge the national theme, Black health and wellness, through our various events. We are proud that we've managed to continue creating events that align with our vision, preserving, educating, and celebrating our history through these altered pandemic changes. Following the discussion today, we know the takeaways from the topics that we engage in today will enrich all of us and our families. And a big thanks to our guests who will be presenting them. Again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'll now hear from Alma Johnson, GCCMA member and moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, good morning, everyone. We are now going to have our Lift Every Voice and Sing. In celebration of Black History Month, we will now have that song. Thank you. That anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth heaven ring, ring with the harmony. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky shines out the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Our child to victory is won. So lead the road we trod to the chasing run out in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat, and let our weary feet come to the place where our fathers died. We have gone over the way that with tears have been watered. We have gone treading our path through the blood of the slaughter. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, likely through stars. where we met thee. Blessed our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, there will forever our God.
Thank you. It's also referred to as the National Negro Anthem. Thank you very much. This afternoon, we are delighted to assemble for this panel discussion to discuss the National Black History theme, Black Health and Wellness. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History creates this national theme for Black History Month. And Black Health and Wellness is the theme. And we're going to talk about how impact of past and present experiences have overall impacted the health and wellness in our community as African Americans. And we're delighted today to welcome Dr. Angela Eklund, physician of internal medicine, Pastor Debbie Sims, pastoral counselor, and Ms. Tanya Easton, parent and child advocate. Welcome to each of you today. We're going to begin with Pastor Debbie Sims, and our opening question is, we'll talk about over the past 2 years, this city, state, and nation, and the world has experienced the COVID pandemic. What effects from your perspective has the pandemic affected our mental, physical, or emotional health?
Good morning, and thank you for having me on this panel this morning. COVID has affected us in every way. When we talk about the mental impact, you have to think about, my husband and I counsel a lot of couples. So we deal with a lot of marital issues, relationship issues. Being quarantined in a house with your mate 24/7 for days on end has caused countless issues in relationships, whereas normally couples are able to kind of push their issues to the side because they're working, they're kind of coming and going. They're forced to face these issues. They're facing the fact that they no longer have their alone time. They're dealing with children in the house. They're having to homeschool their children. So it's been a lot of adjustments, a lot of decisions that have had to have been made. So we've seen a great influx of couples and individuals requesting counseling during this time. And also, when you think about the physical, even as far as myself working remotely, sitting in a chair, 8, 12, sometimes 16 hours a day, when you're at home, you don't get up and walk around like you would in the office. So I felt the difference even in my health. So I know it's affected a lot of people, just the adjustment, the changes, the life change. And because it came on so suddenly, people weren't allowed, they didn't have the advantage of mentally preparing themselves or even trying to. There's been a lot of loss of life, a lot of grief. So it's affected the world in many, many different ways.
Thank you. Dr. Eklund, same question for you. How do you think this pandemic has impacted or affects our mental, physical, or emotional health?
Hi, and I'm really excited to be on the panel today. So really, the pandemic has had a huge impact on emotional and physical well-being. Studies have shown that throughout the pandemic, psychiatric illnesses have increased. So there's been an increase in anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Also, just having a more sedentary lifestyle has happened to a lot of people. So the fact that we had to quarantine people stopped exercising as much, reduced activity levels. And I think now that we're in year 3 of the pandemic, it's important to check in with ourselves and see if we have any symptoms of anxiety or depression. So symptoms of anxiety and depression can be subtle. So it might present as really just lack of motivation. It could present as changes in eating habits. So people may eat more or they may eat less. Changes in sleeping habits. So insomnia might be an issue, or wanting to sleep more than usual. And then really just irritability. That can be a sign of depression. And so I think, being mindful of those things and checking in with yourself and your loved ones. And if anybody is experiencing those things, talking with your healthcare provider about it so that it can be addressed. And then as far as exercise, it's very easy to get in the pandemic mode of not being as active. And I think we have to be deliberate about getting back out there and exercising on a more consistent basis.
Thank you. Mrs. Easton.
When I think about our children and being in the schools, our kids are managing an experience we've never had before. And so when we're thinking about them going to school, they're dealing with a lot of change, a lot of needing to be flexible, and that can cause a lot of stress to our kiddos. And so our teachers are having to deal with the same situation. So are our parents. And so as our kids are going through each environment, they're managing adults who are having a high level of stress. And so a lot of times when we are dealing with stress, we may not be as patient or as present as we can be for our children. And so mental health wise, we're definitely seeing an increase in behaviors in classrooms because behavior is communication. And so, a child may not be able to say, I'm feeling real stressed out today. I'm sick of things getting canceled. But what they might have are big behaviors that teachers and parents are having to manage. And so it's really important that we're circling around them and we're being more sensitive to what they're walking through and providing them the resources they need in order to heal from this situation.
Thank you. Yes, mental health does play such a role in how it impacts us as African Americans. Studies have also shown that we're at times more hesitant to ask for help in that area. So, Pastor Debbie, the questions I want to ask you is, what obstacles do people of color face in receiving mental health care? I think we've kind of touched on that. And do you believe there is a stigma in the Black community that prevents individuals from admitting they need help?
Absolutely, there's a stigma. Most people in the Black community don't believe in getting mental health counseling or therapy. They feel that it makes you weak and it causes a stigma. And so that is the first boundary to individuals seeking counseling, because they feel like it makes them look a certain way in the eyes of their peers or their family. So most Black people aren't even apt to admit that they need the help.
How have you seen the need, Pastor Debbie, for family or couples counseling increase or decrease over the past few years? I know you touched on that in the opening, but if you want to expound on that, how has the need changed for the counseling?
So as I stated, it has absolutely increased. Most of the times couples kind of gloss over the issues that they're facing. They may have disagreements that aren't resolved, but they're able to go on with their day-to-day lives because they're working. Whether it's one person working, the husband working, and the wife is at home with the kids, or they're both working. They come home, they deal with the kids, and by the time they get done with everything, they just go to bed and start the next day all over again. But being home every day together during quarantine and having to face one another every day, they're seeing these issues just kind of compound. And then on top of that, if you have children, having to deal with the adjustments. And even as far as, normally when children are in school, you don't have to worry about 3 meals a day because they're getting breakfast, possibly breakfast and lunch at school. So that's adding on to the financial stress of the relationship. So there are a lot of moving parts in the relationship when couples are together consistently on a daily basis. And we've seen a lot of couples come to us like ready to sign the divorce papers because it's been difficult, just not even just dealing with the relationship, but dealing with their own emotional issues, because we live in our thoughts and a lot of people don't know how to control their thoughts. And so if you allow your thoughts to center on what you're going through or what, you're afraid, you're fearing what's coming next, what's going to happen. And then you've got death in the family. I know people who have had multiple deaths in their family, and they're not only trying to get through their grief stages, but they're also trying to deal with what they're dealing with in their own home, in their own relationships, and even on their jobs. So it's been very difficult.
And lastly, Pastor Debbie, what do you think should be the first step in seeking help for families dealing with multiple problems, pandemic, homeschool options, peace of mind, and perhaps even financial crisis?
So for me as a pastor, I will always say that prayer should be your first resource and not your last your last option. Even when people don't believe in prayer, don't believe in God, it has been scientifically proven that prayer and meditation, it brings calm, it brings peace, and I know that prayer changes things. It's what has kept me. I lost my mom when I was 31 and it was very devastating, but it was prayer that kept me. Prayer brings peace. But on top of that, we know, God put doctors here for a reason. And I believe that you pray and you do the next step. You take the next step. You find a resource. Talk to your personal care physician and see and ask for a referral. Speak to people. A lot of times there are a lot of people going through the same thing you're going through, but everyone's afraid to talk about it because of the stigma that's attached. But of course, the church is a resource. We have counseling services. I would say, when seeking counseling at the church, you also want to make sure that the person is either licensed, certified, or has a degree in counseling, because every leader is not equipped to counsel. And a lot of people have been hurt by that, just thinking because this person is a pastor, they can counsel me, they can help me. Not everyone is equipped to counsel. And I would say, always be careful of that. But there are resources, and I apologize for not making a PowerPoint with the resources on them, but I'll give them to you and I can leave them with you and maybe you can add it to the website. One second. So for couples counseling, there's a website in Texas called Together in Texas. It's TWOGETHER in Texas.com. And we're, my husband and I are listed on that site. We're Knitted Hearts Marriage Ministry. There's a whole array of counseling services there that you can get with, all the connection that you need, the phone numbers, the websites, etc. In addition, if you're dealing with substance abuse or mental health issues, there's a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. There's a website for that. And there is also a National Domestic Violence website. So as I stated, I will send you this information and maybe you can add it to your website for people. But I would say don't hesitate to reach out, to talk to someone about what you're going through and to seek the help, because help is there. A lot of times people think they're in such a state of depression that they can't come out of it. That's a lie. You learn to control your thoughts and you learn that and understand how your thoughts are connected to your emotions. And that's what allows that depression to come in. But prayer is always, always key in every situation.
Thank you, Pastor Debbie. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We will provide resources from today's panel on our website and or Facebook page so that our viewers and community can access them. Thank you. We're now going to segue into the healthcare segment of today's panel. And we're going to start with Dr. Eklund as our internal medicine physician today. And we've kind of touched on access and the importance of asking for help and what have you. And in our community overall, preventative care has really been an issue that of importance for a lot of us in our community, and the lack thereof, and quite frankly, in some segments of our community. So Dr. Eklund, how important is preventative care in overall health and wellness?
So I cannot overstate how important it is for health and wellness. We do things like screening colonoscopy and MAMs, and I want to emphasize that national screening recommendations are made to have the biggest impact. And so we can't screen for everything, but we screen for things that are very, very common, and that if they're caught early, you can have a good outcome. So for instance, with colonoscopies, if you get your colonoscopies routinely, you can often prevent colon cancer because polyps are removed in the precancerous stage. For mammograms, if you get your mammograms every 1 to 2 years, you can often catch breast cancer in the early stages so that it's treated, and then many people can go on to live full lives. And so it's just extremely important to remain up to date on prevention and screening. Other things like annual wellness visits with your primary care physician are important because those are the visits where you screen for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. And so when you catch things early and manage them, you don't go on to have the complications such as heart attacks and strokes. And so it's just extremely important that we remain up to date on prevention and screening tests.
Thank you. And what are factors that impact access to healthcare? What have you seen or experienced?
So I think that's a great question. Cost is a major factor. And so, unfortunately, I see it regularly. People may have insurance, but if they can't afford to pay $300 for a stress test or for an imaging study, they often won't get it. And so rather than having the stress test and determining that there's a problem, someone may go on to have a heart attack a year later. So it's cost is a major factor. I think that the pandemic has highlighted issues with access because there's more of a problem as far as staffing. So there's fewer healthcare providers. Burnout for healthcare providers is a factor. And then there's more people than ever that need healthcare. Language can sometimes be a barrier, and general awareness can be a barrier to healthcare.
In our community, there are some leading chronic health conditions in the African American community. Can you talk about a little bit about some of the chronic conditions that impact African Americans more so than other cultures?
Sure. So some of the main diseases that we experience in our community, diabetes is a major problem, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, coronary artery disease. Those are the main illnesses that we experience in higher rates compared to other people. Again, it goes back to managing things because high blood pressure is silent. And so people may feel completely fine, but they could have high blood pressure that can then go on to lead to chronic health problems. Cholesterol, you can't tell if you have cholesterol or not. So again, it's so important to get in and determine whether or not you have any of these things, because they're very easy to treat.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Telemedicine, especially during the pandemic, took a dominant role in providing care for a lot of individuals. A lot of us had our first telemedicine visit or virtual visit during the pandemic. What impact has telemedicine or virtual medicine had on the African American community, in your opinion?
I think that it's really helped with accessibility. There's a lot of factors that prevent people from going to see their doctors on a regular basis. And so for people who are very busy and can't take time off from work, you can easily get in a quick 15 or 20-minute telemedicine visit. And then also sometimes transportation is an issue for people to actually get to the visit. So it's been helpful in that way. Some people have chronic health conditions that prevent them from leaving the home very easily. So it's improved accessibility for those people as well.
And lastly, what do you suggest should be the best avenue to get important information concerning health awareness for the marginalized community?
You know, I think that's a good question. That's a difficult question, but in general, I think that we all have to be advocates for each other and really get the word out to, if someone doesn't have a doctor that they see regularly, it's important to establish care so that you can have a long-term relationship with somebody that you trust and have the dialogue about your health care. It's a long-term relationship, and it's something where if you put in place simple changes early on, it can really change the trajectory of somebody's health. And so I think just establishing care with someone is the first step.
Thank you. Thank you for that, because it is seems to be an obstacle, especially in the African American community, about trust and establishing a rapport with someone to provide something so important as our health care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Easton, as a parent and child advocate, your role, first of all, we want to invite you to just share a definition of what a parent and child advocate is and does.
Well, thank you. I loved to highlight what Dr. Eklund said, that we are all advocates for each other. I really love that. But as a child and parent advocate, I see my role in the community as someone who listens and learns to people's experiences. And when I see an opportunity to provide a better experience or connect them to resources, or just let them be heard as an individual, or maybe improve their outcomes, I see it as my job to assist them in that. And I've used PTA as the way to kind of get into the schools and listen and learn in on students' experiences. Now I'm a parent educator at the Williamson County Children's Advocacy Center, and I facilitate parenting classes. And so I hear a lot of what our parents are walking through, and through that I can provide, resources or information to help them walk through their experiences. I was a child and a community member who needed someone at times to advocate for me, and maybe just didn't have the information at the time to walk through the situation I was going through. And so now I feel like it's my turn to be that person for other people. And so I love what Dr. Eklund said about we are all advocates for each other.
You said something about information, the access. It's a lot of times people just need to know what to do. And they just don't know. So having someone to kind of walk them through the process or share information is so important. You kind of touched on this, but I want to go a little bit deeper and talk about why do you think this role is necessary for African Americans or students of color in particular?
Thank you. This is a really, really great question. our community historically has had different experiences in the systems that we're operating in. And many times our experiences are not validated by the people who are operating those systems. And so it's really important as a person of color that when I hear what students and families of color are walking through, number one, I believe them. Why do I believe them? Because I've been someone who's walked through those experiences. And so it's sometimes as a person of color, you just want to know you're not going crazy and what you're, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's what we're a lot of times meant to be felt. And so as an advocate, I'm just listening, I'm learning, and I'm saying, yes, I get it. And then we can move forward on how to problem solve. But that's the first and foremost thing that needs to be dealt with. And then we can provide the information and the resources and connecting and figuring out what we need to do. And there's a lot of people who are not people of color who are amazing advocates. And that is appreciated and needed. But there's something a little bit different when someone who looks like you has gone through what you're going through and can feel the feelings that you're feeling and say, yes, I get it.
And I believe that goes back to establishing a rapport of trust. When you see someone who looks like you, who can provide that additional information or what have you that is needed. What does your role look like in meeting the objectives for health and mental wellness for students of color?
So first, I have to get the information. I need to know what's out there. I need to know the resources that are available for our community. And then I have to help with accessibility. And so, coming to Georgetown, I just started asking questions and joining committees and different meetings. And I'm still doing that so that when I am with someone who may not have access to all of that information, I can then connect the people that need to be connected with to help that person. So that would be the first thing that I would say would be an objective is accessibility with information and resources. But also working at the Advocacy Center and providing that free parenting class, I think is really important because it's not therapy. And as we were talking about before, unfortunately, our culture for some reason is looking at therapy like it is a bad thing, and it is not. We need to take that stigma away and, allow ourselves to get the help that we need and know that you don't have to be in an emergency situation. You could just not feel well and you can just need a little bit of boost support to get you to be your optimal self. But what I love about the parenting program is it helps with having parents see it, put on a different lens, how to be there for their child's needs, and to realize how important they are in the emotional world of their children. And so I find that to be a really important aspect to offer our community is it builds community. It helps parents see that they're not alone, but it also provides some additional ways to improve their relationship with their child. I always tell parents, I'm not here to tell you how to parent. No parent wants to be told how to parent. We all do it a little differently. And that is a beautiful thing. And I also think it's very important to know what our school district doing to provide the support for our children when it comes to mental health. So I make it a priority to meet with district staff to see, especially during this pandemic, what are we providing our students, but what are we also providing our staff? Because if our staff is not okay, they are not going to show up their best selves for the students. And so just, talking to people, and again, I go back to listening and learning and connecting people together is how I have that objective met.
Thank you. And this is for all of our panelists that want to chime in. We have a question that was submitted through our chat, and it is, how can our community help others understand the importance of COVID vaccines? Now, this was in the chat that I just pulled out. And Dr. Eklund, if you want to just maybe give a broad overview of the importance in your role as a physician and what you've seen and experienced as well.
You know, that really can't be overstated, the importance of getting vaccinated. We have lived the waves of COVID. And by that, I mean, you know, throughout in Georgetown, over Thanksgiving, we were getting 15, 20 calls a day saying, I'm COVID positive, what do I do? I'm COVID positive, what do I do? And so I have seen firsthand how people who get vaccinated in general do so much better than people who are not vaccinated. And it's also really, really important for people with chronic health conditions to get vaccinated. People with chronic health conditions in general tend to do worse with illness once they get hospitalized. And so, you know, I think that everybody is concerned about the safety of things that we put into our body. And I think that's a valid concern, and it's appropriate to be concerned about what you're putting into your body. But it really comes down to risk versus benefit. And so when you're in a pandemic, the risk, because so many people, because it's so transmissible and because so many people have it, the risk far outweigh, I mean, the benefit of getting vaccinated far outweighs the risk. And so I would just encourage everyone, even, you know, if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, please still get vaccinated. It's extremely important.
Thank you. This was another question, actually a question for Dr. Eklund in our chat today that's been submitted. It's talking about the role of nutrition. And it's stating or asking, what is the role of nutrition in health and wellness? And a follow-up is, what nutritional changes or adjustments can be made for improving our health and wellness?
That's a really great question. Nutrition is very, very important because, you know, culturally, we have our own habits as far as cooking and foods that we like, and it's very special. But at the same time, we have to make nutrition a priority. And so things that you want to try to eat, really vegetables, you want to try to eat as clean as possible. So it's vegetables and protein, fruits and vegetables. Mediterranean diet is a great diet that is helpful for lowering cholesterol. And so fresh fruit, nuts, fish, chicken, those sorts of foods are important. And really just minimizing fast food, minimizing fried foods, all of those things are very important. And then the other point is a lot of people in salt intake is important.
Yes, thank you. And on the note of nutrition, Ms. Easton, as you, in your role as a parent advocate, I'm sure you see students who perhaps come to school maybe needing, you know, not able to function as well as they would like to because of maybe poor nutrition or access to healthy foods. I know we're in a period of inflation now, and things are increasing in price. Every time we turn around, we're paying a little bit more for those fresh veggies or, you know, our food options. And so as your role as a parent advocate, how do you see your role in helping with regards to access to good programs to help families provide that nutrition for their students?
Well, that, you know, it's interesting during the pandemic, and I can speak for in Georgetown, our school district has been offering free lunch to every child, and for breakfast and for lunch. But as much as we love to say it's healthy food, it is food, but it's maybe not all that they should and could be eating. And I know, I have a 13-year-old, and she doesn't always pick up the fruit, at the school. And so I think it really comes to education. And what Dr. Eklund was saying is it's the foods that we should be eating. we don't always purchase as parents. And it could be for a lot of reasons. One, you can purchase it and the kid isn't going to eat it. Or because it's more expensive. I remember as a child, going to the store and, if we had $40 for food that week, fruit was not going to be something we picked up because it wasn't going to fill our bellies. So we need to educate our parents on the foods that they should be purchasing for our kids, but we also, like you said, with inflation, have to make those the resources available in the community that are providing food at a lower cost or even for free. A lot of our churches have pantries, and we have the Caring Place that provides food. I know our schools they do backpack buddies with our churches. But again, if you don't know it's out there, how can you use it? So it's education and accessibility for our parents.
Another question that's being asked, Ms. Easton, is how have you seen the mental impact of our students in learning during the pandemic?
So it makes me feel sad, honestly, because it's not even just our students, it's our teachers. Everyone is so stressed out. And it's interesting because when I talk to people in the schools, last year wasn't even the stressful year for them. This year is the stressful year for them. And everybody is just barely hanging on, just waiting for May to come so they can breathe. We've got a lot of our kids, especially when this last Omicron hit in January and the beginning of February, kids were having to, be quarantined and leave, and teachers were having to manage classrooms where half their students were gone. Learning's not happening when they're at home. And so how do you, continue to teach students that are in your class as it's a cycling door? And so unfortunately, our gap is growing for learning. And that's why we need to hold the district accountable for their plans to shrink that gap up. Mental health wise, our kids are stressed out. And how is it showing? It's showing with big behaviors. Again, I'll go back to how kids learn how to manage their emotions based on how we as adults manage our emotions. And as a community, we tend to not even talk about feelings and emotions. We're real good at managing behaviors, but not really, behavior is communication. What is behind that behavior? What is our child really trying to tell us? And I have had to learn as a parent to take that step back and go, what is my kid trying to tell me? Because I can deal with what the behavior is in front. But if I'm not dealing with her emotion, then the core issue is not being dealt with. And so as parents, and I won't even say parents, just as community members, because the number one protective factor for children who are walking through traumatic events, and this pandemic is a traumatic event, is having at least one trusted adult in their life that cares about them. That could be any of us, whether we have children or not, whether they're, a child in our church or a neighbor, or just, a child that we have access to. We can be that caring adult to them. And so what we need to do is let them know that it's okay to have feelings. Again, I feel like as a community, we have to shoulder a lot of our issues and our problems, and we don't talk about it and we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. But how we change that narrative is providing that safe space for our children to have those emotions. For an example is a lot of times we have that children should be seen and not heard, that old school way of thought, or I'll give you something to cry about. I'm sure we've all heard that maybe once, but we need to change that and say, I can see that you're feeling sad right now, and just be with the child in that moment. It's so amazing how not always problem solving a child's issues, it just being there with them in that helps them feel validated and seen. And we all need that at every stage of our life. Very simple things we can do for them to help with their mental health is just by listening to them.
Great. So important. Thank you. Dr. Eklund, a question that's come up in our chat during the panel today is, do you have any comments about handling the disinformation and the role of social media about the vaccines?
Oh, so I think that there has been a lot of disinformation, but really what I in website, there's new studies and new information coming out constantly about COVID and what's beneficial. There's new medications that are available for COVID. As far as disinformation with the vaccine, it's important to look at trusted resources. Okay, so just because people put things on social media, even some physicians have put, inappropriate things about the vaccine on social media. And so it's unfortunate that healthcare crisis has become so politicized. But I think the main thing is just look at trusted resources. And so you can always count on the CDC, talk with your healthcare provider about it. And that would be my biggest point of advice.
Thank you. It has been a wonderful discussion today on our theme, Black Health and Wellness. We want to thank each of our panelists today, Pastor Debbie Sims, our pastoral counselor, Dr. Angela Eklund, internal medicine, and Ms. Tanya Easton, parent and child advocate. And I just want to allow each of you to just share with us some closing thoughts that you want to leave with us today. And I'll start with Ms. Easton.
So working at the Williamson County Children's Advocacy Center, I always have to bring up the topic of child abuse because it's a topic that doesn't get discussed very often. And it's a taboo topic. Unfortunately, it has touched many of us. And so I want to just quickly close with that the number one reason why children don't disclose abuse is because they don't feel they're going to be believed. And so I want to remind people that if children say, something has happened to them, please believe them. And we are all mandated reporters in the state of Texas. Because of mental health issues and because of the pandemic and quarantining, child abuse has increased. And so we need to be very aware of the signs and symptoms of abuse. The Advocacy Center does offer a training to recognize and report child abuse, and we are going into the schools to talk about it. But I wanted to bring up that because it's something that, is not top of mind for most people. But I know that as a community, we want to protect our children and we want to be that safe, trusted adult for them and to believe them. I am honored to be a part of this panel, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Eklund.
I just want to circle back to the anxiety and depression topic. And I think it's very to try to destigmatize it. I tell patients all the time, the brain is just another organ like the heart, and people have no problem taking their blood pressure medicine or their cholesterol medication. And so rather than thinking of it as a sign of weakness, if you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed out, I think it's important to just have that self-awareness and have the insight to act on it and do something to improve the state if you are experiencing anxiety or depression. So I just think it's very important to reach out, and whether it's through prayer or exercising more or counseling or medication, any of those things can be avenues to try to improve your mental health. And I just want to say I really appreciate being a part of the panel today. It's been very interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity also.
Thank you, Dr. Eklund. It has been my pleasure to serve as your moderator today as we discuss Black health and wellness, not only today, but every day. We hopefully have provided some information to help our community and others about our health and wellness and the impact and of what our outlying issues have on our health and wellness, how we handle it, how we can reach out for help and not feel ashamed about it, because we're all in this together. And as we move forward through the issue, the pandemic, we have hopefully gained some information today that will be a resource for us going forward. Thank you again. I appreciate it. I'm now going to turn this over to Ms. Regina Durden, our chairperson for Black History Month of GCCMA. Regina.
Thank you, Alma, and thank you, panelists. This has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you, Ms. Easton. Thank you, Dr. Eklund, and we thank Pastor Debbie. We thank you, Alma, for doing a great job as a moderator. Well, I think that's it for today. And again, we thank you, community, for participating. We thank you, panelists, for giving us this great information. And Paulette, did you have any final words before we end?
A last thank you so much for our panelists for giving us this resource of information. And we're hoping that we continue to be that integral part of the community as a resource. Thank you all, and for our viewers as well. Thank you, and for people that sent the questions, the chats, everything. We thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a great rest of your day.